Do you need me to wait to turn that on? All right. Welcome to the Rules and Elections Committee meeting for Wednesday, January 26th, 2011, in room 1050 City Hall. It is a committee of one, but our city attorney has joined us. I was about to cancel the meeting, but now that you're here, we'll make it go. It's just myself. I'm not sure if Mr. Weston is going to join us or not. He wasn't sure. Due to some family issues, health issues, but I think he may join us for a short period. Otherwise, these will go forward as communications from the chair. We just have one item. Do we have any general public comment? Yeah. Seeing none, we'll go to item number one.
Item number one is motion to dismiss Krikorian on amending the city's election code to adjust timelines related to the preparation of ballot measures and deadlines for the submission of ballot measure arguments.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
What is before you is a proposal by Councilman Smith wherein he requests that the election code be amended so that one of the actions, the timeline to prepare the ballot arguments, comes after the current deadline for submitting the ballot summaries from the Ballot Simplification Committee. And at this point, I'm going to rip out this paper clip and pass out the current schedule. There we go. For the primary and the general elections, and you can see it pretty well spelled out. E stands for election, so the nomenclature in our office is election minus 165 days, election minus 125 days, etc. So you can see the sequence. E125, the last day for council to instruct city attorney to prepare any resos for the ballot. E95, prepare the ballot order and ballot designation. E85, submit the ballot arguments. E75, submit the rebuttal arguments. E70, the CLA's impartial summary and the CAO's financial impact statements on ballot measures is due. And then E64 is the day to submit ballot summary. And what Mr. Smith proposes to do is that that day to submit ballot summary goes higher up, earlier in the chain. So the bottom line is that...
And just for folks who, I don't know if anybody's listening in, but if they were to be, the CLA, our Chief Legislative Analyst, does an impartial summary. That's a longer summary, and then that is simplified by a committee, the Ballot Simplification Committee. So that's why we have the two different, the ballot summary and the impartial summaries. Is that correct?
Yes.
Or no?
No, not quite. There are three different impartial summaries that are included in the,
okay.
One is the ballot summary, which is written by the Ballot Simplification Committee, which is a citizens committee along with appointees from your office, the mayor's office, and the city attorney. That's the who, what, where, when, that goes at the beginning. Then there's an impartial summary that's done by the CLA that's separate from that.
That's sequentially second, right?
Yes, exactly. And then there is the CAO's financial impact statement, followed by the ballot arguments.
Okay. So, and the main, Mr. Smith didn't say anything about the impartial summaries or the financial impact statements. It's only the ballot summary?
The relation of the ballot summary to the ballot argument and rebuttal.
Because those do, I mean, the other ones, if he didn't like what he read from the CLA, for instance, he wouldn't have had a chance to respond in the rebuttal arguments, for instance, in this case either, correct?
I suppose I can't speak to what he...
But I mean, just time-wise, he wouldn't have had, like, let's say if he didn't like that one also, let's say the CLA wrote something and somebody felt that it wasn't as impartial or didn't have the right language.
It happens in the timeline after the last rebuttal series has gone in. So as the election timeline is structured now, the very last action to take place is the council's approval of the ballot summary, which was prepared by the Ballot Simplification Committee, the citizen committee that our city attorney Harit Trivedi referred to. What that means then is all the information that has been accumulated up to that point comes to a choke point at the ballot summary stage. By reversing it and having the ballot arguments reverse the order, then the ballot rebuttal would be the choke point, would be the end of these, accumulating layers of series of information. To be quite honest, the sequencing of the deadlines of all the different ballot activities is a policy decision of the council. So we will comply with however you wish to move forward. We would suggest, if you're going to move the ballot simplification date, to also move the CAO summary and the CLA fiscal impartial summary to, say, an E90 date. But this also then feeds into my larger recommendation that there are always revisions and enhancements to the election code as a total document, and we think it probably would be wise to subject it to an overall review, and then perhaps after our May runoff election is done, we could present in a comprehensive and thoughtful way and an interactive way, because one impacts the other, list of proposed changes to the election code in total, which would include Mr. Smith's proposal.
What are some of the other things, the election code revisions that you've either heard about or looking at, or?
Just off the top of my head, right now, I believe the election code has in it specifically that election staff must be available Monday through Friday or Monday through Saturday from X o'clock to Y o'clock. And we need a chance to discuss among ourselves whether that's precluding us from, being able to furloughs and adjustment of staff, and when the rest of the city is open, it's closed, the election has to stay open. So that's one consideration. Harid, I think you had some others too.
We do have a working list, but I don't have it with me to recall. But there are a lot of technical changes, things that we encounter as we run an election, that we notice that the code is not as clear as it needs to be on, or could be improved. And I know elections and our office has a running list. I don't have that with us, but they're not major, but there are ones that after any election we would want to do a house cleaning and update the code. And I think something we do regularly. We have done, and this would be, as the city clerk pointed out, something that could go within that comprehensive set of changes.
They're all code changes, none of them are charter changes, right?
No,
Right.
they are not true. And whatever changes are made and council adopts them, they do not take effect until at least 6 months. So that therefore projects it into a future election and not anything current. So the election code has to be in place at least 6 months before the next election cycle.
Okay. I guess the motion is in response to perceived non-impartiality of one of the arguments, or the summary, excuse me. It obviously changes the dynamic to have the three supposedly impartial summaries and statements actually be part of what people rebut or respond to. So I have some concerns about that, but I'm willing to kind of explore this, and I'd like you to think those things through too, the city attorney maybe as well, to think through, in between emails, it's cool. Think through, some of the impartiality of that. I mean, do we turn those statements into something more, not more partisan, but more pointed if people are responding to that? Does it not protect the impartiality of them for people to actually be conversing with them ahead of time? Because if there's a problem with whether those things are done right, I think that can be addressed also separately if people feel like there aren't impartial writers in there, or people want to make that case.
Please.
Holly Walcott, Office of the City Clerk. I think also one of the things that we were looking at as June started to explain is why, and the very things that you're mentioning, is why we would want to move the calendar back. In other words, we would not want to move, if the council so desired us to move the rebuttals and arguments till later, what we would want to do is move the whole calendar forward.
Right.
Because if you wanted to, you'd have to move, instead of the impartial summaries being at 870, that would have to move to E90. And the CAO financial, those all would have to be moved higher, so that it would give people a chance, if they wanted to take us to court. And we have to have those it has to be resolved before we go to print.
Right.
So we can't push anything any later. It all has to be moved back.
And is the 60 the print kind of deadline, more or less? E minus 60?
She'll answer that, I guess.
Yeah, sure.
Arlene Taylor, Election Division Chief. So E60 is the last day we receive something, but we actually need to approve the final version of the official sample ballot / voter information pamphlet by a week later. So even E60 is very tight, and that's why we're always happy when we get the digests earlier than the deadline, because we can start working on them. So we would appreciate having more time to be able to get the printing completed in a less frenzied manner.
Okay. Well, we'll fold that into some of the analysis too, not just the motion and the response to, you know, the sequence of it, but also just some of the logistical stuff. It came up a lot in this round because some people thought like all of these things were hurried, even though, as you know, in this committee we've discussed some of these things for 5-7 years and didn't seem too hurried, although obviously people don't focus until the last few days that they're ever voting on something, and that's just human nature. Over the years you can move it up and they'll still wait till the last second. But whatever changes you need to look at as well, why don't you, I'll take that recommendation and just fold that in, report back to us after May elections, and we'll see what we can do and let people kind of also have some time to chime in. And we'll use that time too to look at whether this was just a solitary event or whether this has ever come up before, whether people feel like the Ballot Simplification Committee is being impartial, whether the CEO and CLA statements are ever seen that way. I know that happens a lot at the state level when, you know, the title of initiatives are always challenged as being less impartial than they claim to be because they influence the vote so much. But we want to make sure that our city folks are doing as good a job as possible with that. So why don't we'll reschedule something like maybe June-ish? Does that sound enough time, or June or July?
July, end of fiscal year is.
Sure, let's do it after the fiscal year starts.
That'd be great.
Once we know how many furloughs we all have. And if that prohibits you from having furloughs, I wouldn't make any changes, you know? I would just enforce it. All right, so we'll send that to the city clerk to work with the city attorney as well, and that will go forward as a communication from the chair. Thank you. This meeting's adjourned.
Thank you.